You're listening to the Monocle Daily, first broadcast on the 19th of January 2026 on Monocle Radio. What is going to happen to Greenland? Why is Israel pushing back on Trump's Board of Peace? Is loss of faith in the US dollar pushing central banks to stock up on gold? And what's on the agenda at the biggest ever World Economic Forum? I'm Tom Edwards. The Monocle Daily starts now. Hello and a warm welcome to the Monocle Daily, coming to you from our studio here at Midori House in London. I'm Tom Edwards. My guests today, Isabel Hilton and Somnath Bhattabial, will discuss the day's big stories and will be joined by Monocle colleagues around the world for the sharpest take from Davos, from Zurich and from Nuuk. Stay tuned, all that and more ahead here on the Monocle Daily. A very warm welcome to this Monday edition of the Monocle Daily. Now, your well-trained ears may have noticed by now that I am not Andrew Muller. That is because he has been dispatched to Nuuk in Greenland, from where, I'm delighted to say, he joins us now. Andrew Muller, good afternoon to you. How is Nuuk treating you?
Well, so far. We arrived here earlier today on the Air Greenland service from Copenhagen. We are getting to know the city, which, to be honest, isn't likely to take that long because it's really not very big. But it is, absolutely. Well, it's brilliant to be here. This is a place I've wanted to visit for as long as I can remember. It's something of a shame about the circumstances, obviously.
Well, exactly. And we'll come to that, Andrew, in just one moment. Also joining us lucky listeners with the view from, well, I guess across the DAT region, perhaps, our own Tyler Brulé on the line from Monocle's Zurich HQ. Good evening to you, Tyler.
Good evening, Tom.
Now tell me, Andrew Muller's up there in Nuuk. I don't know, if you were heading Nuukwards yourself, Tyler, what would you be jotting down in your notebook on the way up there of things you wanted to see, people you wanted to meet? I don't know, what would you be prioritising?
Well, listen, I would be prioritizing. Well, maybe we should rewind, Tom, because where did this all come from? Of course, we know, and as Andrew said, this is maybe not the best circumstances, of course, to be in the territory of Greenland. But I was flying back from Tokyo last week, and we want to talk about sort of geopolitical issues. Once upon a time, you could come back from Zurich or from Tokyo. It would take about 12 hours. It now takes about 15 hours. And part of that is also that you do fly across the top of Greenland and you come down the east coast of the country to make your way back to the European continent. And that was when I was sort of looking down at that landmass last week. I was thinking, okay, what are we doing in terms of mobilization? Should we be there? And Andrew Muller is there now. Also our foreign editor, Lex Self, is on the scene. But if I was sort of jotting down things, actually I put it to our listeners, Tom, and this was in my column on Sunday. I asked listeners, I said, listen, we've got our crew heading out there. You send us your top questions. And so I think I forwarded a series of questions from our readers, listeners, to Andrew Muller. Hopefully he's working away. Hopefully he's finding the right guests because there's a lot of questions to be answered. So that is sort of on the list, Tom.
Okay, well, Andrew, I'm sure you're busy with your homework, but just tell me, I know you've only been there for a few short hours. Give us some first impressions, not just about, what you've seen as you've strolled around the relatively small confines of Nuuk itself, but I don't know, mood on the ground. From those initial exchanges, do you get this sense of, a population in that city particularly, and then across the wider area, who are sort of, I don't know, just a little bit on tenterhooks, as we all are, looking in from the outside?
There's a few things which are odd, but I think possibly you notice they're odd if you're conditioned to look out for them. At both ends of the flight from Copenhagen and Nuuk, there were serious-looking police folk with sniffer dogs. I don't know if that's a regular occurrence or whether they are actually concerned that coup plotters are trying to smuggle themselves in as tourists. As you walk around Nuuk, which, as I've said, is not an expansive megalopolis, it's very hard to travel far without appearing in the shot of at least half a dozen news networks as sort of reporters are doing stand-ups on the street outside. And there are a lot of Greenlandic flags and also hanging in a few shops the posters saying Greenland is not for sale and various other things. I think some of those were put up during the protest at the weekend, which it's worth reflecting on because on the one hand it wasn't a very big protest, objectively, empirically, in a global sense, because it was estimated at about several thousand people. And then you remember that only about 20,000 people actually live in Nuuk. So half the capital turned up.
And Andrew, obviously, we're going to be hearing so much from you. We've got special programmes. This show anchored from Nuuk over the next few days, which I'm sure your regular listeners will be relieved to hear. Tyler, let me come back to you and just get on the sort of European perspective. One of the great and fascinating narratives here is how Europe weighs up, coordinates and calibrates its response. Lots of discussion about this trade bazooka today, which is for some reason first in mind for me. What are you hearing? The conversations you're having, how confident are people that Europe is going to be able to put up a united front on this one?
Well, listen, it was a topic of conversation last night. We gathered in Milan, in fact, not for a geopolitical summit, but this is, of course, it is Fashion Week. For menswear, so you could say, well, what does that have to do with anything? Well, of course, you have lots of entrepreneurs, you have lots of business owners, you have a lot of journalists, and of course, they are also concerned about where things are going. And of course, we are very much in a European context. We are surrounded by Frenchmen and Italians and Swiss and Germans, and I think there is this sense of we have to. This is a moment. If we do not stand up, then who else? And this, again, if our own one of our principal allies can bulldoze us and really sort of shove us into a corner, well, what does that mean for everybody else? If amongst friends we cannot come up with some type of solution. So I think there is this sense that Europe has to find a way, and it has to do so confidently as well. A lot of discussion maybe as well about, this notion of taco, that Trump always chickens out. But maybe we've also seen that's not entirely been the case. If that was maybe the old Trump, is he going to blink this time round, or is he really going to dig his heels in? Now, listen, I don't think anyone thinks that we're going to, reach a world of active conflict. But at the same time, I think a lot of people just look at just this level of distraction that has just come about, not out of nowhere. We knew it was coming down the track, but not that it would already be so lasting.
And Andrew Muller, if I can just come back to you quickly, in terms of the voices you're going to be trying to feature on the show, the sort of, I don't know, more slightly left field angles you're going to want to cover, presumably you want to hear from, I don't know, people who are trying to run businesses on the ground in Nuuk, or people who are involved in the way that Greenland showed its face to the world, whether that's in tourism, whether that's in commercial aviation. Are these some of the kinds of people you're hoping to catch up with in the next few days to get that real take of what's actually happening there?
Absolutely all of that. In fact, as soon as we're done with this show, we are wandering a couple of blocks to the boutique of Bibi Chemnitz, the local fashion designer who has made something of a motif of the Greenland is not for sale merch. They're speaking to us before they travel to Copenhagen and onwards for various fashion shows across Europe, and just having a brief look in their shop earlier, it's interesting to see how swiftly and really quite how stylishly they've incorporated some of that into their offering. I mean, I think obviously they're not silly. They understand that lots of media especially have come to Greenland in the last year or so, and I suspect this week more than ever. But yeah, something I'm definitely interested in finding out is how it has affected this, proverbially lonely and usually disregarded place to be suddenly the focus of the world's attention. And, and again, bearing in mind, this is just a few tens of thousands of people. It is like, isolating a particular suburb of London or Paris and deciding that this will be the crux of a great global crisis. So, yeah, it has to have had an effect on life here, and I'm very curious to find out what that effect is.
No, an incredible moment to be there. Excited to hear your reporting, Andrew, in the days ahead. Tyler, just to bounce back to you, you mentioned Milan. Look, I'm a huge winter sports fan. Was the city sort of gearing up, literally and metaphorically, for Milano Cortina, the big Winter Olympic jamboree rolling into town? Was it all excitement around every corner?
Let's just stay on a sartorial note for a quick second. Hopefully Andrew Muller is still tuned in, because if he's already on sort of, a bit of a retail hunt, he's over to see Bibi Chemnitz. Andrew, can you please stop by a furrier, because our Fiona Wilson, I bought her a pair of sealskin booties from Greenland. I bought them in Copenhagen. Tom and Andrew, completely worn out. She's really sort of, used those, I think size 39 she'd be after. I'm probably a size 44 or 45, so I'm also in the market for a sealskin slipper. If you can sort that out.
Tyler, whether or not you are jesting, we did go past a shop with an excellent line in sealskin wear earlier today. So
I am not kidding. Listen, I don't want
your desires and your preferred sizes.
Yeah, and you can expense them, please, as well. Andrew, thank you for that. Tom, to your question, one of the remarkable things. Listen, we are weeks away from the Olympics, and of course, you will know we had quite a setup last time round in Paris, and there was, of course, you could have been in Paris in June of 2024, and there was a real sense that the Olympics were coming. Aside from all of the structures being built, the city being tidied up, everything, but there of course were lots of logos, not just, of course, for the Paris Games itself, but of course the 5 rings, etc. I was amazed. I took the train down from Zurich yesterday, arrived at Stazione Centrale in Milan. I thought, okay, there would be all kinds of banners and this real sort of feeling that the Olympics are on the way. And of course, as we know, the Olympics are being co-hosted between Milano and Cortina. Tom, nothing. Zero. Now they said, okay, well, I should have gone over to the Duomo, and there's some pavilions going up, etc. But even then, I just thought, as you went through the city, I didn't see any Olympic rings. I have no idea what the logo is. I don't know if there's a wacky mascot or not. None of it, Tom. So I believe they're coming. I think you're going to be there on the 6th. I'm supposed to be doing an interview. Maybe, Tom, you can tell our listeners what's happening with the Olympics. I mean, we will be there. I just hope that there's going to be some athletes.
Well, I was going to say, maybe we need the Monocle Roadshow, right, to get into town. As it is in Nuuk, Tyler, and in Zurich, it will be in Milan. When we're there, people will know all about it. Tyler, stay with us just one second. Isabel Hilton, my guest in the studio, I think was itching. Was it when the mention of sealskin slippers, Isabel?
I was, if we're putting in our retail orders, I want a Greenlandic MAGA hat, which has the legend "Make America Go Away" on it.
Okay. Andrew Muller, can you get one of those as well?
Absolutely noted. If I can find such a garment, Isabel, it's all yours.
Thank you, Andrew.
Well, look, just this quick detour. Tyler, look, sadder news, but keeping it in garments. Well, actually, the world of the impeccable couturiers, the passing of an incredible epoch-defining talent, Valentino Garavani, today. Just while you're on the line, Tyler, tell us about this contribution to, the business. Unmatched, really? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, unmatched. I think oftentimes, of course, we had, the death of Giorgio Armani last year, and people talked about the end of an era, that he was the last of his kind. I even argued then, we still have to remember that Mr. Garavani, was still around at that point, and I think when we consider, I guess probably a special era, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s of, the extravagant show. Also when the show was not spectacle, it was still, it was elegant, it was contained. When we're talking about a couturier, this I really believe is I hate to say it, but the proper sort of end of an era. When we think about the jet set lifestyle, the plane waiting on the runway in Paris after the show, heading out to Le Bourget, a cavalcade of small dogs and handsome young gentlemen. All of these things. That was the world of Valentino, a gentleman I met a number of times, oftentimes maybe at the far end of a table at an amazing dinner. But there was really this court of Valentino, and remarkable in terms of course, what he was able to deliver, not just, of course, for people to be, for things to sit on people's shoulders or on their hips or wherever it may be, but also a fragrance business that was built, and really a proper brand as well. But as you said, died at the age of 93. Just looking at, of course, the press releases now already. Services already starting. He will be lying in state from the end of this week, in fact. So this has moved very, very quickly. And of course, just a release only out within the last 2 hours.
Well, Tyler, I think you might be getting some more reflections from you in our programming over the day ahead. I think you might be popping up on the Globalist, maybe some more reflections on the life of Valentino. Thanks so much for joining us from Zurich. Go well. Andrew Muller, just a final quick thought so people can join you for the Daily tomorrow, but we'll be hearing from you and reading your insights across the Monocle output, right, online, in our brilliant newsletters and, of course, on our radio shows, correct?
All of that and more besides, I suspect. But yes, the Daily this time tomorrow will be somehow live from Nuuk as on Wednesday and Thursday. And yes, more besides on the Globalist and the briefing and in our newsletters.
Well, Andrew, listen, take care, go well, keep yourself warm and find the best spots in town, the hot spots, I guess, literally and metaphorically. That's our Andrew Muller. More from him in Nuuk. But we are back in the studio here in London. My excellent and esteemed guests, Isabel Hilton and Somnath Bhattacharya, are here. Somnath, let me just jump in on that. Somewhere back there, some reflections on what's happening on the ground in Nuuk. Look, crazy times, crazy dynamics. What have you made of the last few days? We've obviously got the threat of tariffs. We've got this European response, as muted as it might have been. We've got this bazooka. Is it being wielded? I've got to get your take.
Just to take it back a step, 3 things I wanted to quickly mention, especially for our listeners. We've moved so far ahead in the story so quickly. First, Denmark has complete territorial claim over Greenland, and the US has forfeited its right to that land in 1916. In 1933, the Permanent Court of International Justice accepted that, and there was a kind of... Denmark gave up some territory in the Caribbean, and this was agreed. Second, Greenland has a right to decide its form of government, and in a recent vote, it has clearly chosen to stay with Denmark. Third, the US, which has been talking about threats from China and Russia, in the 1950s, they have signed an accord which allows them to have enough military presence in Greenland. So there's no justifiable reason except perhaps land and minerals, which Trump would be wanting. So in this scenario, there's Isabel and we were talking before the show that there's a total breakdown of law and order post the Second World War. Whatever the global North had set up, we see it at a precipice at this point of time. I don't know what's going on ground in Nuuk and Greenland, but these are strange times.
I think that could be the understatement of 2026. Isabel, look, this is a place that you know actually fairly well. You've been there yourself, I believe.
I have been to Greenland.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about, we are talking, as we have been over recent months, about the effective collapse of the post-war consensual rules-based order, as Somnath has explained there. But I guess in the sort of shorter term, how do we make sense of what we're seeing and hearing, particularly from DC at the moment?
Well, I was talking to a Greenlandic friend last week who said, I strongly advise you not to seek logic in Trump's position or you will go mad. And I sympathise with that. We can make sense of the repercussions. We can't make sense of the action. There's, as often with Trump, there is a germ of truth in all of this, which is that Russia and China have designs on the Arctic. Yes. Why do they have designs on the Arctic? Because of climate change, which Donald Trump says is a hoax. So first problem. But I think everyone but Donald Trump accepts that there is climate change and the ice is melting. And there is a history of China wants, we know we wants to travel the northern sea route because it saves money and time. It also, building an effective northern sea route requires building ports and facilities and things that China is good at building. Russia needs China because it needs the investment and that capacity. China needs Russia because China is a self-declared near-Arctic state, but it doesn't have a legal right to be in the Arctic except through the partnership with Russia. So that's a symbiotic relationship. Greenland, in about 10 years ago, China made some moves on Greenland, which included bidding for the contracts for the 3 airports, which have been rebuilt. Now, the Greenlanders had been begging the Danes to invest, to finance the building of the airports. The Danes had said, no, we're broke. No, it's not going to happen. So they went to Beijing, and Beijing said, yes, how many would you like? And, of course, we'll build them for you and we'll finance it. The Americans got to hear of it and shut that down. Equally, the Danes had a disused naval base that they were going to sell off until there was a bid from a Hong Kong company, and that got shut down. So actually, the Chinese don't have a foothold in Greenland. They had an agreement with an Australian mining company for something in the north of Greenland, but that has gone away as well. There is no active investment in mining. Now, you mentioned rare earths and strategic. Yes, in theory, Greenland has a lot of those. Again, the Greenlandic Prime Minister was in Washington last year, begging for investment from the Americans. And nobody came. But, I mean, there's a very meagre interest from the United States in the mineral potential of Greenland for lots of reasons. It's very hard to get investment in the Arctic. Everything you do in the Arctic is harder and more expensive. Greenland has very little infrastructure. It has no unemployment, so you have to import the workforce. And, we all know with rare earths and strategic minerals that it's all about the concentrations and the ease of access. That's what makes it, viable as a commercial proposition. So even if you think that this is a kind of El Dorado for strategic minerals, again, they've had the opportunity, they've looked at it and they said, we can go somewhere easier and more profitable in the meantime. But all of this is having an effect on Greenlandic politics. And in all this, we forget that, Greenlanders have politics too. And they're all pretty much pro-independence from Denmark. But the question of the speed of independence and how it's achieved is what determines who wins elections. And of course, the Trump effect has got the moderates in power. We have, as opposed to the rapid independence people. So we have a very moderate, sensible government at the moment with a very young prime minister who is, finds himself in the middle of this insane storm, but until then had been doing his best, again, to get American interest and American investment in Greenland without a lot of luck. So none of it makes sense. But I think we should hear more from Greenlandic politicians in this whole argument.
Which hopefully we will do
Indeed.
in the days ahead. It's interesting, maybe a final thought on this, that idea of having designs on territorial advance, whether it's resource, whether it's access, whether it's more efficient transport and infrastructure routings across the north of the planet. Sure, you need to have ambition, you need to build, but you also need to build partnerships. And the thing I find truly astonishing, if we go back to your quick historical summary, Somnath, a NATO member politely requesting another NATO member to sort of cool the hostile talk. I know we keep tracking this collapse of that post-World War II order, but that is just something, I don't know, maybe I'm too naive. Maybe should we have been expecting to hear?
No, I mean, really not. I mean, the consensus, the economic consensus, the political consensus was that this will never happen again. And we will talk about Bretton Woods and the gold in a bit, what's happening in Gaza. And the world system, the Western world system has become, Arundhati Roy was saying this the other day, that what has probably happened is that the nature of democracy, the Western democracy, has become very shaky because most citizens in their countries wouldn't want the things that is going on, right, in America or in the UK or in many parts of the world. But we are unable to have institutions which can protect our interests. So this agreement that we had with the state, that is probably collapsing.
I mean, this is some heavy duty, high fibre stuff for a Monday evening. But Roy,
could I have just one last thought on Greenland and whose interests this really serves? It clearly doesn't serve the United States' interests. It doesn't serve NATO's interest. I can think of one man who's rubbing his hands in glee at this turn of events. And I would remind you that in 2019, Senator Tom Cotton, who is a right-wing Trumpy senator from Arkansas, a letter was circulated online from the Greenlandic foreign minister to Tom Cotton saying, please, could you give us more money to organise the referendum on Greenland so that we can enter into a new arrangement with the United States? This letter was a forgery. The Danish intelligence services concluded that it was a forgery which originated in Moscow. And the only place I can hear champagne corks popping at this whole ridiculous episode is Moscow.
We may...
Tom, may I come in on this one? Again, and this is slightly tongue-in-cheek. Again, Isabella and I were having this chat that wild conspiracy theory doesn't seem wild anymore, that Trump probably is a sleeper agent of Moscow. This entire situation
Is he a sleeper? He seems pretty active.
There you go. Slightly tongue-in-cheek there.
Let's talk about a couple of these things, because I think there is this thread, of course, that's going to run through a couple of the other topics we mentioned at the top of the show. Trump, of course, is going to Davos, the biggest ever WEF. We're going to be hearing from our caller there a little bit later, but it's the largest US delegation, which I guess in some ways, at least they're going somewhere where talking happens. I don't know, looking on the positive side. But let's take a look at a couple of these examples. Somnath, you just alluded to one where his policies are changing the landscape. At the weekend, the United States announced this Gaza Board of Peace, Trump's picks for who will temporarily run Gaza. Israel's pushed back. The Kremlin has said that Putin, we just mentioned him, has been invited to join. That's not been stood up or not. What do you make of this, Isabel?
Putin on a board of peace is beyond parody, honestly.
Trump heading it.
Yeah.
So,
Yes, with Trump heading it.
Trump for life.
But this whole kind of phase two is getting totally out of control. So the board of peace, which is allegedly this, it seems to be getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and seems to be a mini United Nations. The Gaza Executive Board, which seems to be supposed to be doing the work, and then there's a founding executive board which includes Krishna and Blair. Frankly, I'm confused already, and I doubt that anyone involved in this process is any less confused. Well, how is any of this going to work? Is there any serious executive authority? Is there any serious plan? There are some serious people, but none. We know that none of this will work unless the United States, really puts some serious and not stupid effort into it. Israel is going to object to everything because Israel doesn't really want a phase two, and to have Putin on board just keeps us all looking the other way.
And so it's interesting because some people have said, look, Trump, in a way, his sort of rampant transactionalism seems to, on occasion, have actually delivered some political outcomes, not all of which are terrible. And they're talking about countries need to contribute X billions of dollars to sort of get a spot on the board of peace.
Yeah, $1 billion and you're there for life.
And we totally trust Trump to spend it wisely, don't we?
60 countries have been invited, so 45 pays up, $45 billion. It's beyond the pale.
So this isn't one where taking a ruthlessly transactional approach counterintuitively could actually give a better outcome.
Wouldn't. And look, morally, this is so wrong. Not one Palestinian to decide. Come on, this is 21st century, not the 18th. You don't go into a country, say, Queen and, God has sent us. Not one Palestinian. And for that matter, only one Israeli businessman has been asked. It seems bizarre. And Tony Blair's statement is, I need to read this out aloud. It gives hope to people in Gaza that they can have a future different from the past. He's from the past. And to the Israelis that they may have a neighbor which does not threaten its security. Really?
Do we filing that squarely in wishful thinking folder?
I think we are. And the talk of Trump as a transactional figure, if you look at his business record, he's a serial bankrupt who is notorious for not paying his contractors and sailing very close to the wind, if not, beyond it. He's a transactional figure. Most of his transactions were pretty rubbish.
Well, this leads us elegantly on to the next story I want to talk about a little bit, which is exactly as he styled himself, as this sort of beacon for growth for the US at least. He's pretty explicit about that. But if we look at what tariffs are doing, if we look at the dollar, longer linchpin of the global economy, it's under a bit of pressure, and lots of central banks are turning to gold as a security instead of the dollar. We've seen that, of course, in gold market. Incredible performance over the last couple of years. Is this Somnath, though, again, is it a consequence of Trump's sometimes always erratic policy making, and particularly his interference with the Fed, trying to push criminal sanction against Fed Chair Jay Powell, et cetera, that we're going to see this kind of economic consequence?
Yeah. Look, investors everywhere, private and sovereign, want stability. Trump does not provide it. The interference with the Fed, as you said, direct interference in monetary policy. That's not going to go down well with investors worldwide. And so you see the slump. Then, Pax Americana has collapsed. There's a global discord. And thus you see investors rushing to safer havens. And also, I mean, before Bretton Woods, gold was the one which we always pegged our currency to. This is quite dollar is new. 1970s, everything was broken down post-Reagan, and now you're seeing it. I mean, look, and I do not want to overstate the case because there is not too many alternatives to the dollar at the moment. So it's gone down from, 56% to about 48%. So 6% is huge. Taken that. But there are no big alternatives except going back to gold. So we don't want to overstate the case, but there is a definite movement away. And the global investors are shaky about how secure the dollar is today and whether the investments are secure.
What about the view from Beijing, though, as well? That's quite interesting because if we think about China's ambitions when it comes to the UN, for example, what would be the take there if they see the dollar, I don't know, weakening? Maybe it's a portent of something more significant.
Well,
how will that be welcomed?
I think there are a number of aspects to this. I mean, the Chinese were one of the biggest holders of US Treasury, and they have been reducing their share. They're still big, but I think the biggest is still Japan. Then it's China. Then it's the UK. Actually, we hold a lot of US Treasury. Now, if people stop holding US Treasury, if they find something else, then interest rates will skyrocket. The US won't be able to finance its debt, so it'll have to raise interest rates, and everything begins to get worse in the global economy. The other thing that the Chinese have been trying to do for quite some time now is to de-risk the power of the dollar. And that has a number of aspects. It's been setting up a number of alternative ways of doing international trade because, again, the dollar was the main vehicle for international trade because, it was easy and it was dependable. But if the dollar's going to go up and down, that's one thing, but it's also a matter of power. So the Chinese have been doing increasing numbers of straight currency swaps in bilateral trade. Through the BRICS, they have set up an alternative to SWIFT, which is small, but it has the potential to grow. They're doing a huge amount of bilateral trade with Russia in rubles and renminbi. And they're beginning to kind of dismantle the obstacles to trading in local currencies, which are, if we do a deal in our respective currencies, I then get a lot of renminbi, which I have to spend in China. Whereas if I get paid in dollars, I can do anything with that money. So there are issues around this, and it's still relatively small, but it's growing. And the other aspect is that it means that, if you get on the wrong side of the United States, it limits the kind of measures the United States can take against you on the trade front and the currency front. And I think they're also looking at the threat of, reserves held elsewhere being frozen again in the event of a conflict. So people are beginning to de-risk. And that's one of the effects of destroying trust in the global system, which the Trump administration has done. People start looking around and thinking, well, gosh, we're vulnerable. Did the UK ever imagine it would be threatened with tariffs by the United States for defending Denmark against the United States? Unimaginable, but it's happened. So everybody is looking to de-risk at this point.
We're going to be crossing to Davos in just a minute to talk to my colleague Carlotta Rebello. Just a quick thought on the World Economic Forum. So I'll start with you. Do you have any optimism that we might hear some good old-fashioned common sense this week? Mr. Trump's there on Wednesday, I believe. But it's an incredible array. I think 64 heads of state, almost 1,000 CEOs of really significant players. Might we get some good proactive fixes, even to some of these slightly scary structural problems?
I'm a huge cynic of Davos. I'm an old-school Marxist. So I'm the last person you should ask. So now I'm going to pass on this one. I'm a vulgar Marxist, so no. Nothing is going to come out of Davos. Hasn't.
You should have been the last, but you were the first, I heard.
I pass.
Can you give me some rays of sunshine?
In a rare upside moment, I think actually I thought last year we'd reached peak Davos, that it was becoming rather irrelevant. But the attendance this year is quite something. And I think that in the world as we are, given that the United States seems to be trying to destroy the United Nations and any other forum that it doesn't control, that actually meetings like Davos will have a function, because they're just places you can meet. Whether or not, this expression of global capitalism comes up with solutions is almost not the point. It's the side meetings. It's the fact that Trump is there, that everyone is going to be there, that they will find ways to talk. I think that matters. We have to keep talking.
Well, let's bring in our Carlotta Rebello, who's in Davos up at the World Economic Forum for us. I don't know, Carlotta, what is this, your fourth or fifth trip up there? I'm not sure what you're up to.
I think it's the sixth one, actually,
Sixth?
but one of them doesn't really count because it was the pandemic one in the summer. So without snow, is it really a real one?
Well, listen, look, that's an interesting point, isn't it, Carlotta, that Isabel makes very eloquently there, that, whatever else is going on, however tumultuous and volatile things are, we must preserve the capacity to get together, to meet, to talk, to try and be constructive. What's the mood on the ground? You've already been up there for a couple of days. What are people talking about? Is there a little bit of cautious optimism around?
Maybe a slight hint of cautious optimism, Tom. But what I can say for sure is that I can't remember an edition where the Monday has been so busy. Usually Monday is the day that everyone slowly rolls into town. You start seeing the cameras getting set up, still some finishing touches to some of the houses. But not this year. Some of the houses already had full programs going on today with sessions and panels. And last night, when we arrived to try to set up, a bit earlier, we felt like we were arriving just with everyone else. So really there's a bit of momentum behind this edition to get things in place and things going from the very beginning. Now, we have mentioned, of course, the attendance of Donald Trump and this largest US delegation ever. And credit where credit is due, because I think that is part of why there's so much focus and so many people drawn to this year's edition of the annual meeting. There are other forums, as we know, where top leaders and premiers come together and discuss. But what still makes Davos quite interesting is, I think, bringing in the private sector and citizens as well, but the private sector into some of these conversations. I think that's still what gives it the edge, and having more business leaders here this edition too might be what actually helps to try to get some outcome out of this week.
Somnath, more business leaders? Does that lure you back from the edge?
I mean,
no.
Did you hear that a hint of skepticism, the cynicism, maybe hope? Even your correspondent doesn't believe there's much going on.
No, she's optimistic. And listen, Carlotta, just on that point about who is there and who isn't there, some interesting things that I've noted. Putin's special envoy will be there, we think, but the Iranian foreign minister won't be there. There's a couple of interesting ones. People have been talking about that.
Yes, super interesting. There was confirmation that Kirill Dmitriev, Putin's special envoy, will attend Davos. This came through today via the Kremlin and then with confirmation from the World Economic Forum. Now, everyone is seeing this as Russia essentially crashing the meeting between the US and Ukraine. It's been widely expected that Zelensky and Trump will meet at some point on Wednesday, and they're expected to sign new security guarantees for a potential ceasefire deal with Russia. So it seems almost like Dmitriev is trying to arrive before that, and his decision to show up last minute seems to be to disrupt that. Now, there's another element here as well, which is that what makes this trip even more surprising is that WEF has stopped all the formal ties it had with Russian entities and persons since March 2022, when essentially the war in Ukraine began. And no Russian officials or businesses have been to the annual meeting in Davos ever since. And, just next month, we are approaching indeed that 4-year anniversary. So the timing of it is quite interesting. And yes, in the last few hours today as well, it was confirmed that WEF has banned Iran's foreign minister from attending. He was due to speak on a one-on-one session tomorrow at lunchtime. So now that won't be happening.
Thank you very much indeed, Carlotta. And just remind us, you're hosting live shows from there. The briefing over the next 3 days, you would invite our listeners to keep their lunchtime appointment with you if they're on the European time zone?
Absolutely. From 1300 Davos time, midday in London, we'll be hosting the briefing Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday from here. And of course, throughout the rest of the programs, expect not just check-ins from the snowy mountains, but a few of the interviews too. I don't think it's going to be a quiet week.
Another understatement. Carlotta is our senior correspondent. She'll be up at Davos all week. Carlotta, thank you. And just to bring my panellists back for a final reflection, Isabel, it was quite funny when Carlotta mentioned Putin's envoy there. I don't know, what can I say? A wry look passed over your face. Can you explain to our listeners the thought that was in your mind at that moment?
I just had the image of him flying in to tug the leash of the American Prime President and remind him not to stray too far off course.
Somnath, last chance? Is that one you round?
No, I think we should end on...
Oh, you're happy with that?
Yeah. Very happy. That's a good image.
Okay.
Tugging.
I love it. That is the excellent insights, as always, of Somnath Bhattacharya and Isabel Hilton. My thanks to both of our daily guests. Thanks to Carlotta Rebello, to Tyler Brulé, and to Andrew Muller. Do listen out for all of these special programmes coming this week on Monocle Radio. That is your lot, though, from this jam-packed Monday edition of The Daily, which was produced by Angelica Jobson and researched by Annalise Maynard. Our sound engineer was Elliot Greenfield. My thanks to them, one and all. I'm Tom Edwards here in London. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow. Andrew Muller in the chair in Nuuk, Greenland. Don't miss it. This is the Monocle Daily.